You married the wrong twin. He said it low, too close, and too quiet for the moment to be casual. His breath stirred a strand of hair near my cheek. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy. Like a door had opened, one I'd locked shut a lifetime ago. We were alone on the balcony, tucked behind laughter and light. I'd only stepped out for air. But now, the air was different. It clung to my skin, pressed against my chest, carrying something unspoken. I didn't look at him. Not yet. My fingers curled around the iron railing, cool and slick with dew. Below us, the garden shimmered with scattered lights. Beyond the glass doors, the soft clink of glasses. Ethan's laugh, steady and warm, drifted into the night. You shouldn't say things like that, I whispered, though I didn't know who I was protecting, him, Ethan, or myself. Daniel didn't answer. He just stood there. Still. Present. As if he had waited years to speak, and now that he had, he didn't trust himself to say more. I almost didn't come tonight, he said finally, voice barely above the hush of the wind. Thought it'd hurt less to stay away. His voice, it had softened with time. Or maybe it was me who'd gone brittle. Easier to crack now. 25 years. Since I said yes to Ethan. Since I chose safety over spark. I never told anyone Daniel was the first one. The one who made me ache without touching me. I still think about you, he added. Every day. The words didn't echo. They settled. Inside my ribs, in the parts of me I'd packed away with old letters and wedding china. I turned slightly, but before I could speak, he stepped back. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't. Because something inside me shifted. Not loud. Not visible. But real. A tremor. A quiet crack in the foundation. Through the windows, Ethan raised his glass, smiling wide, eyes bright. Everything about him was familiar, which suddenly felt like a different kind of distance. I straightened my dress. Lifted my chin. Walked back in with practiced grace. But I didn't feel the same. And Daniel's words followed me, like footsteps in a quiet room. I met them when I was 22. Ethan and Daniel identical to most eyes. Same smile, same voice, same tilt of the head when they laughed. Strangers couldn't tell them apart. But I could. From the first moment. To me, they were night and day. Ethan was order. Quiet kindness dressed in buttoned cuffs. The kind of man who knew exactly when to offer his coat, and never made a scene of it. He remembered my favorite tea without asking twice. Always waited for me to finish speaking. With him, life felt manageable. Tidy. Like clean sheets and folded laundry. He steadied me, in ways I didn't know I craved. He listened, really listened, and never once raised his voice. When the world felt sharp, Ethan was soft edges. Daniel, though. Daniel was something else entirely. He moved like a secret you weren't supposed to hear, but did anyway. There was rhythm in his walk. A dare in his gaze. He never sat still. Conversations with him were like open windows, breezes coming in from directions you couldn't predict. He asked dangerous questions. The kind that made you think about the life you hadn't lived yet. He noticed too much. Like when my laugh wobbled. Or when I said I was fine and didn't mean it. People assume there was a fight. That the brothers clashed. But there wasn't. No triangle. No battle. Just two men, and one decision. It was Ethan who asked for my number. And I said yes. Because it made sense. He felt safe when I still felt unfinished. He was calm when I was noise. I told myself love didn't need fire to be real. It could grow quietly. And it did. We built something. A house that echoed with warmth. Birthdays, rituals, 1,000 tiny habits only the two of us understood. We rarely fought. Maybe that's why, when the silence did come, I didn't notice it right away. But Daniel never really disappeared. Not completely. He lived in flickers. Late-night memories, uninvited and soft-edged. The way he once said my name like it meant something unspeakable. The time his eyes met mine too long after I laughed at one of Ethan's stories, and he looked away. I told myself those thoughts were harmless. Just stray sparks from a fire I'd never lit. But harmless things don't follow you onto balconies 25 years later. It was our 25th anniversary. A small gathering. Just close friends, close family. The kind of night that feels polished around the edges, linen napkins, string lights, too many wine glasses clinking in practiced gratitude. Toasts were made. Laughter spilled across the room like spilled champagne, bubbly, bright, impossible to sweep back into the bottle once it started. Ethan looked good that night. Silver brushed through his temples now. The kind of man people trusted on sight. He laughed easily, passed hors d'oeuvres with one hand, poured wine with the other. I stood beside him. Smiled at the right beats. Laughed when the room needed it. But around the third toast, something shifted. Not pain, not exactly, just pressure. Like the walls leaned in a little. Like the neckline of my dress had shrunk, or the air had grown too warm. It was subtle. But I felt it. Like a breath I couldn't fully catch. So I slipped out. The balcony was dimly lit. Just enough glow to outline the railing, catch in the folds of my skirt. A breeze moved through, not cold, just curious. It curled around my ankles, tugged at the hem of my dress like a question. I closed my eyes and let it. For a moment, I wanted to be nothing but a figure in the dark. Then came the footsteps. Slow. Certain. I didn't need to turn. I knew it was him. Daniel didn't speak right away. He never rushed silence, that was always the difference. He leaned on the railing beside me. His shoulder close but not touching. And the stillness between us, it wasn't empty. It was thick. Full of everything we'd never said. I waited for a joke. A small one. Something to shift the weight. But none came. Instead, he let out a breath long, quiet, like something he'd been holding since we were young, and said, "I still think about you." I turned to look at him. He wasn't smiling. I shouldn't have said that, he added quickly. But it's the truth. The breeze moved again. Or maybe it was me. A subtle lean inward, a thought I didn't catch in time. I looked down at the lawn below, where the garden lights blurred softly in gold. Inside, someone laughed too loudly. A glass shattered. The sound echoed like punctuation. The night no longer felt peaceful. It felt charged. Like something sacred had been disturbed. Or remembered. Daniel didn't reach for me. Didn't move closer. But his presence felt like a hand, pressed gently against the door of a locked room. Not forcing it open. Just reminding me it still existed. That it still had weight. I didn't speak. My throat felt lined with silence. And when he finally stepped back, when the stillness returned to neutral, I didn't follow him. But I didn't walk away, either. I re-entered the room like I hadn't just stepped off a cliff. Like I hadn't stood on the edge of a memory I'd buried so deep, I forgot it had a pulse. No one noticed. Or if they did, they were kind enough to pretend. I smiled at the right faces. Laughed when I was supposed to. Touched Ethan's arm when someone cracked a joke. Nodded at stories I'd heard a dozen times before. My wine glass still sat on the side table, half full, still chilled. I picked it up and let the cold press into my fingers, let it ground me. Across the room, Daniel had already folded himself into another circle of conversation. He laughed, but not too hard. Spoke, but not too much. His expression was practiced. Measured. Like he hadn't just undone me with a breath and a sentence. We didn't lock eyes. But I felt him. Felt the shape of the space he wasn't looking in, like a bruise under a sleeve. Ethan leaned toward me, murmuring something about the caterer, a mistake with the shrimp skewers, or maybe the table linens. I nodded, murmured millimeter just soft enough to sound present. My voice fell into its script. My body remembered the rhythm. But something inside shifted. Subtle. Like thread pulled taut where it used to drape easy. Later, after the last glass was collected and the porch light turned off, the house fell quiet. Familiar quiet. The kind we never noticed. I moved through the bedroom like a sleepwalker. Earrings off, bracelet unclasped. I folded my shawl. Hung up my dress, careful not to catch the fragile strap on the wooden hanger. Every motion deliberate. Gentle. Like I might break something if I moved too quickly. Ethan brushed his teeth. Hummed something tuneless. I sat at the edge of the bed and watched the curtains. They swayed in the breeze from the cracked window, soft, slow. Like something waiting to be asked. He came out of the bathroom, towel tossed over one shoulder. He kissed the top of my head as he passed. Happy anniversary, babe. I smiled. You too. He didn't hear the pause between words. Why would he? We climbed into bed. Sheets cool. Familiar. His hand found mine beneath the covers. A soft squeeze. Brief. Affectionate. Automatic. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in I don't know how long, I didn't feel steady. Not broken. Not afraid. Just off balance. Like something inside me had tilted an inch off center and I didn't know if I'd find my footing again. Or fall. Daniel started showing up more after that. Not suddenly. Not suspiciously. Just naturally. A creaky step on the porch. A familiar knock at the side door. A voice calling, need a hand with that, before I even realized I was struggling with the garden hose. He'd appear with his sleeves rolled, his smile easy, a screwdriver in his back pocket like it was part of him. He said he was just being helpful. Ethan agreed, said it was nice having someone around who knew tools better than he did. Man's a human instruction manual, Ethan joked once, clapping Daniel on the back. It made sense. It all made sense. But I had changed. Or maybe my vision had. Now, I saw everything differently. The way Daniel leaned against the fence, hands in his pockets, as Ethan talked about building a new shed. The way his laugh arrived just a second too late when our daughter made a joke like his mind had been elsewhere, or watching me instead. The way his fingers brushed mine when I passed him the hammer, lingering half a breath too long. I told myself it was nothing. He was Ethan's brother. He was family. But it didn't feel like family. Not anymore. He was careful. Always careful. Never stepped where he shouldn't. But somehow, every gesture felt like it brushed the edge of something unspoken. A toe against a boundary drawn in dust. He'd ruffle our son's hair, then glance sideways. Ask Ethan about weekend plans, then tilt his head slightly, like he was listening for something beneath the words. Watching. Measuring. One afternoon, he helped fix a drawer that had been sticking for months. Bent low, shoulders hunched, tools spread out across the tile like a quiet offering. I stood at the sink, rinsing fresh herbs, water trickling over my fingers. The scent of basil rose like memory. My hands moved without thought, but my eyes kept drifting back to him. He looked up, dirt on his knuckles, brow furrowed in mock frustration, and said, "Still the same drawer, huh? You always hated this one." He said it like a joke. But my breath caught anyway. That word. Always. Ethan entered then, laughing about something from the garage. The moment folded closed like a page turned too fast. Daniel wiped his hands with a rag, stepped back, smiled like nothing had happened. It was harmless. It was nothing. But that night, while Ethan slept beside me, I couldn't stop hearing his voice in my mind. You always. Like I still belonged to a time that never truly ended. Like some part of me, the part one thought I'd buried, still lived in his memory, and had never once asked to leave. It happened on a Wednesday. Dinner had ended. Plates half rinsed, cutlery soaking, laughter still clinging to the corners of the kitchen like steam after a warm bath. The windows had fogged a little from the heat of the stove. Ethan had already disappeared into the den, football, or emails, or something equally forgettable. Daniel stayed behind. Said he'd help clear the table. He didn't have to. But he did. I wiped the counters. He gathered plates. We moved around each other with the kind of rhythm that doesn't need rehearsal, the kind that lives in memory. A soft choreography. Unspoken steps. Elbow brushes. Glances that landed and then looked away. The faucet hissed. The sponge squeaked faintly over porcelain. The air felt humid, like something unspoken had settled into the room and was waiting. And then, without intention, our hands met in the sink. A spoon. Both of us reaching. Fingers. Palm. Skin. Brief, and then not. He stopped. I did too. Not in shock. Not in panic. Just, suspended. As if the room had paused to listen. As if time had narrowed down to a single point, not forward, not backward, just held. I shouldn't have said anything that night, he whispered. His voice was soft, uncertain. Like a footstep on creaking wood. But I meant it. I didn't move. Couldn't. The water kept running, warm, steady, constant, like it didn't know what was happening. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. A dog barked 2 houses down. All of it felt distant. None of it belonged here. I looked at our hands. At the way his hovered just beside mine now, close enough that I could still feel the echo of his skin on mine. I chose Ethan, I said quietly. The words caught in my throat on their way out. But I dreamed of you. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even wanted. It was just true. A truth that had grown heavy, and finally slipped through. His eyes closed. Not long. Just a half-second blink that held too much. And when he opened them again, I saw all of it. The ache. The apology. The want. The years pressed into a single glance. Then maybe, he said, voice low, steady now, your heart was braver than you thought. I should have looked away. But I didn't. Because in that moment, quiet, fragile, surrounded by leftover pasta and a fading sunset, the room tilted. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just enough to feel the floor shift beneath everything I'd once called certain. I didn't sleep that night. Ethan snored softly beside me, one arm stretched across the bed, not lovingly, just habitually, like the shape of sleep itself had forgotten to notice me. I lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, hands folded on my stomach like I was waiting for news I had buried under years of silence and called peace. The air felt too still. Too careful. Like even the night didn't want to interrupt what had begun to crack open. I kept hearing Daniel's voice, the way it shifted when he said braver. Like he wasn't praising me, but mourning something. Like braver was just a softer word for too late. I turned that word over in my mind, brave. Brave would have been walking away. Brave would have been telling Ethan the truth. Not just about Daniel. But about me. The parts I'd dimmed down. The small wants I'd tucked inside routines. The hunger I'd painted over with patience. In the morning, the silence between Ethan and me felt normal. Predictable. Coffee brewed. Toast browned. We moved around each other like clock hands, aligned but never touching. He buttered his toast in the same even strokes he always had, and I wondered, did he feel it too? That strange shift in gravity, like our kitchen was tilted by one invisible degree. That afternoon, Daniel showed up, something about the loose gate hinge. I pretended not to flinch when I heard his voice. I offered iced tea. He declined with a small smile, his eyes scanning the backyard like he was memorizing it. We didn't speak of the night before. Not out loud. But when I passed him the wrench, his fingers brushed mine again. Not accidental this time. And I didn't move away. After he left, I stood in the laundry room, holding a shirt I didn't remember folding. The dryer hummed behind me, a low, constant sound, like breath I could lean against. I pressed my back to the washing machine and let the warmth rise through me. Let it hold me while I unraveled quietly. I had loved Ethan. I still did. But not with fire. It was love like primer. Like wallpaper. The kind that smooths, softens, covers. Daniel was something else. Something louder. Something unfinished. I pressed my palms to the metal, still warm from the spin, and whispered, I don't know who I am in this. And for once, it was the truest thing I had. Not because I didn't love my life, but because some part of me had finally opened its eyes. And now, it refused to go back to sleep. That night, Ethan reached for my hand while we sat on the couch. The television flickered blue across the walls, casting shifting shadows over throw blankets and half-empty mugs. My legs were tucked beneath me, and his fingers slid against mine like they had 100 times before, maybe 1,000. It was nothing. It was everything. A small gesture. Routine. Reflexive. But I startled. Just slightly. Just enough for my breath to catch. He didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't say. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen, another crime drama, voices sharp and urgent, full of tension that didn't belong to us. We were just background noise to each other by then. Habit wrapped in warmth. But I watched him. The soft crease between his brows. The faint smile that came when the case was solved. The weight of his exhale when the credits rolled. I couldn't remember the last time I'd looked at him like this, not with judgment, but with distance. As if I were standing just a few inches outside of my life. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I didn't know where I was anymore. When he kissed my forehead before bed, the way he always did, I felt it land like a question. Gentle. Familiar. But unanswered. We brushed our teeth in tandem. He made a joke about the toothpaste tube being nearly flat. I laughed. Replied with something light, something practiced. But underneath, I was shaking. Quietly. The kind of trembling that doesn't reach the surface, that lives in your bones and waits for silence. Later, while he slept, I turned toward him. Watched his back rise and fall beneath the covers. The slow, steady rhythm of someone untroubled. This was the man I had built a life with. A family. A history. We shared rituals and middle-of-the-night pharmacy runs and years of soft mornings with mismatched coffee cups. And yet, my body felt like it belonged to someone else. Like my soul had stepped an inch outside of my skin, and didn't know how to climb back in. I hated myself for it. For the wondering. For the quiet way Daniel's silence had started to feel like invitation instead of warning. For the memory of his fingers, warm against mine, passing that wrench like a secret. I curled in on myself, one hand pressed to my chest, and tried to breathe. But the ache wasn't pain. Not exactly. It was grief. Not for what I'd done, but for what I couldn't unknow. That something in me had shifted. Moved. And no matter how tightly I held Ethan's hand, it wouldn't take me back, to the version of myself who had never stepped onto that balcony and listened. The version who still slept without dreaming of a choice she never made. And now wasn't sure she hadn't. We never spoke of it again. Not directly. Not even in passing. Daniel stopped showing up as often. No more drop-ins. Fewer excuses. The loose gate hinge stayed loose. The drawer in the kitchen jammed again. His absence arrived without announcement, just a space where presence used to be. I told myself it meant nothing. That this was his way of stepping back, of restoring balance. Maybe it was mine too. A silent agreement between people who had stood too close to something they weren't supposed to name. But even silence can echo. Especially after something that mattered. Ethan didn't change. Still steady. Still attentive in all the ways that show up on paper. He made the coffee every morning, exactly how I liked it. Picked up my favorite yogurt from the store without being asked. Rubbed my back in the evenings when I groaned about garden weeds overtaking the hydrangeas. He didn't know he was holding pieces of a woman who wasn't entirely there. Or maybe he did. Maybe some quiet part of him, the one that noticed when I stared out the window too long, or when my laugh arrived a second too late, chose not to ask. Some mornings, I'd catch myself watching him while he stirred his tea. Not wondering about him. Wondering about us. About the version of us that might have existed if I'd chosen Daniel instead. Not the chaos or the fantasy. Just the ache beneath the what if. The conversations we never had. The dinner tables we never sat at. The words that never got to leave his mouth. I wondered if I would have been braver, or just lonelier. If a love that burned differently burned better. But I didn't reach out. Neither did he. Life as it does folded back around the secret. Wrapped it in calendars and laundry and meal prep. In children's laughter and grocery receipts. I clipped roses. Sent birthday cards. Folded sheets into quiet stacks while the kettle whistled behind me. And yet, sometimes, I'd be standing in the kitchen, watching Ethan laugh with one of the kids, soft and easy, and I'd wonder what that same laugh might sound like if it belonged to someone else. Daniel's voice would return then. Not loud. Not insistent. Just a phrase. You always. And my chest would tighten. Not with regret. But with memory. With knowing. With the weight of a life built on choices. And haunted, quietly, by the ones that almost were. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next story.